Hello, guys.
Hi.
Can you?
Hello.
Elena,
Okay.
Elena, well, I was worried
Hi.
about you. We were going to send out a search
Yeah,
committee
I
for
don't
you.
know what happened.
You got
Hi
lost.
there.
You got
Hi,
lost.
Jeremy.
Hi
You
there.
you got lost in cyberspace.
Hi.
Great to see you. Great to see
You're
you.
right.
Elena.
I was great to see you, Nina. I was trying to share my screen and everything sort of fell apart. Let's see if I can do it without making a mess again. Can you see my screen or not so much?
Yes.
Do you see the Thoroton texts? Not really. Okay. Let's see. We have a minute to make arrangements.
Coping
Okay.
strategies.
150.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the document I'm trying to share? Yes, something that starts with bedtimes. Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you, guys. Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining room 3. I'm very excited. So this conversation is going to be about the value of silence in Jewish tradition, which sounds, now that I think about it, a little pompous. In reality, I want to tell you a story that we all knew, in which there is a lot of similarities about our own times and how what's the role of silence in all this? What's the role of silence and contemplation during hard times in life and personal life, but also communal life or a nation life, so to speak. So we will look at this story together, and I'm going to use the text that you see together. And what I'm going to do, because it is in Zoom, it's harder to do what I like a lot, which is talking and having sort of group discussions. I'm going to ask you to use in a couple of occasions the chat function to express your own feelings, and I'll share them with the groups. And then at the end, I hope that there will be some time, to share these things, briefly. Each one of you, whoever feels that it wants to share his thoughts. So let me start by just giving you a little bit of context. So the context is that we're talking about a great person in Jewish history, which is no less than the prophet Elijah. So the context is that we have 2 kingdoms here, the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Judah. And lo and behold, there is, after we have the period of the United Kingdom, under David and Solomon, then this agreement starts, between the 2 kingdoms, where the north is more evolved, more modern, so to speak. The southern part of the kingdom is more traditional, the kingdom of Judah, strictly monotheistic, whereas the northern kingdom and the northern tribes have been more open to the influences of different cultures, and polytheism was sort of more accepted or tolerated, whereas absolutely was not in the kingdom of Judah. And there is, the differences in doctrine are only part of the picture. The reality, lo and behold, there are the whole issues of the fight between the 2 kingdoms is about taxes. This is something very modern, and difference is that the North feels it has to pay taxes to the central government in Jerusalem. Sounds familiar? So they sort of react badly against it. And it is a time of great confusion. So confusion in terms of values of what really matters. And when there is these times of confusion, that's the time when false prophets arise. So that's where we find our hero of the story, which is Elijah, that he, to prove, to the king of Ahab, the king of the northern kingdom, that really the God of Israel is the true God. There is this majestic scene at Mount Carmel where there is this sort of battle between or challenge between the prophets of Baal, the prophets that were with the king Ahab of the north, and Elijah represents orthodoxy and monotheism and the God, the only God of Israel. And so the story goes that, they present sacrifices in presence of all the people of Israel. And then there is this fantastic scene in which, the prophets of Baal are there jumping up and down and asking their gods to burn their sacrifices, but nothing happens. And then Elijah says, oh, maybe your gods are sleeping, or maybe they went for a walk, or maybe they're having fun, or otherwise engaged. They can't really accept your sacrifices. So he makes fun of them. And then there is this great scene in which the God of Israel burns, the sacrifice of Elijah, to everything, the altar, the wood, the stones, and everything is dissolved in this huge, ball of fire. And then what happens? Then there's the interesting thing happening, that nothing happens. So after this majestic, sort of manifestation of God, the scene ends. That's chapter 18 of the Book of Kings, and we're back to square one, because the king Ahab goes to his wife Jezebel and says, "Oh, look, he won, right? He killed all the prophets of Baal." Jezebel gets mad, and there she goes. Here's the first. You see the first square in your screen is the first piece of text. So we have Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done and how he had slain all the prophets. And Jezebel sent a messenger unto Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I make not your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow of this time. So in other words, he said, no, whatever you've done and whatever this big show your God has made, I'm going to kill you, and just as you did to our prophets. And when he saw that, he arose and went for his life, and he came to Beersheba, which belonged to Judah, the southern kingdom, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he requested for himself that he might die, and said, it is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am not better than my fathers. And he lay down and slept under a broom tree. So just the first, sort of sharing with the group. Elijah is facing undoubtedly a very hard time, right? Because there was this big show of power, and not only, it went to nothing, right? Because there's really no true victory of the God of Israel, right? There's still, all the tensions are there. And not only that, Jezebel and Ahab are even more infuriated. They're going for his life. So he's escaping. So any similarities with our own reactions when we face challenging or difficult times? So he does a number of things, right? He's escaping. He's going first to Beersheba, he's coming to Carmel, it's the north of Israel. Imagine he's walking all the way to Beersheba. That's quite a long way to go. Leave his servant, but that's not enough. He keeps escaping. He goes into the wilderness, so he probably goes further south, in the Negev desert. And then he sits down, and then he requests that he dies, take away my life. And he lay down and slept under the broom tree. So using the chat function, let's give ourselves a couple of minutes and share with the group using the chat, what what do we do when we're facing big challenges, like the challenges we're facing now, right? We had a huge, and we still are in the midst of a very difficult political moment. And then, we have the pandemic getting worse by the day. We may have on top of this our usual, difficulties of life that keep going. So anything that we recognize, we do when we're under great stress. To use the chat function, you just go at the bottom. I probably have to get stop share, and you just go on chat and just share it, or if you feel so inclined. Any similarities with what Elijah is doing? He's basically going to sleep, right? He's trying to, so he escapes, he sleeps. So Jeremy is sharing some coping strategies, trying to find some rhythms, eating, sleeping, exercising, and sleep is good. How about the bad reactions? Something that we do when we don't want to face situations. Do we tend to disengage or numb ourselves with things, run away, turn off the news? How about watching TV? Watching too many Netflix shows. But anyway, we have some examples, but I'd like to reshare my screen and go back to the text. So what happens then afterwards? So the text goes on and says, an angel touched him and said unto him, arise and eat. And he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on the hot stones and a cruse of water. And he did eat and drink and lay down again. And the angel of the Lord came again the second time and touched him and said, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. And he arose and did eat and drink, and went with the strength of that meal 40 days and 40 nights unto Horeb, the mount of God. So here instead we see some coping strategies, right? That some Jeremy shared, exercising, perhaps. What's really happening here is that while Elijah is sleeping and sort of numbing himself, well, what God does is, number one, he wakes him up, right? The first thing that you need to do is to do exactly the opposite of what maybe spontaneously we do, which is go into sleep or numb ourselves. So wake up, be aware, open your eyes, face the situation. Then the second thing is really taking care of ourselves, right? Because what the God, is the angel, but really is the messenger of God, does is he feeds poor Elijah, right? He takes care of him. And Elijah, first he eats and drinks, but then he goes to sleep again. And then the angel, it doesn't give up. God doesn't give up. He goes there and wakes him up a second time and touches him. And he says, get up and eat. This journey is too great for you. And then he eats and drinks again. And at that point, he's ready for the real spiritual journey, which is not what he has done so far, right? What he has done so far is to run away, right? But the text says he was going now, with the strength for that meal, 40 days and 40 nights unto the Horeb, the Mount of God. That's Sinai. That's what Moses meets God, had met God at the time of the Ten Commandments, the revelation, the first revelation of God. So again, the sort of right coping strategies is really, first of all, to take care of the body. So remembering to eat well, to sleep well, to take care of our physical self first. And then to take care of our souls as well. And that's the looking for the silence and looking for the desert and looking to have that contemplative space in our life, whatever works for us, or whichever way we want to do it. Then what happens as the story goes on? So Elijah goes to the Horeb, to Sinai, which is believed to be the Sinai. He came unto a cave and lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him, and he said unto him, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah says, I have been very jealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, slain your prophets with the sword. And I, even I only, am left. And they seek my life to take it away. So again, if you feel inclined to use the chat, again, what do you think is really going on here? What's happening? What's really ailing Elijah? And does he remind you of someone else, or something else that was in a similar predicament, someone else in the Torah, in the Tanakh? Anyone has anything to share? If you feel it's easier to, just say, unmute yourself, and because we're a small group after all, so we can just share.
Well, Moshe ran away from after slaying the Egyptian and doing some other. He kind of ran away because the thing was known, and settled into the desert. And God found him there and spoke to him, woke him up.
Right.
Although
it seemed like, yep.
Although one might argue that in some ways he was already awake, because he was able to see the burning bush and have curiosity about it, and so he was open to the idea of God speaking to him. I'm not sure I yet see this, except that in this story, except that Elijah did, in fact, he ate and drank and went to the cave for 40 days.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anyone else has any idea about what's going on here? Or do you really remember similar patterns of,
I think it's a
similar characters in the Bible having?
Isn't that a foreshadowing of the golden calf when they throw down the altars? I've been very jealous for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, throw down your altars. Is that
right? I think so. I mean, I don't have the answer. I don't think there is a right answer. I'm just, sort of, let's think all together what could be going on. But certainly, there is this passion or jealousy for God, right?
When Moses came down from the mountain and saw the golden calf, and he's the only one left that's abiding by what he's supposed to do. Right.
So another one that I'm going to throw there, which is Jonah. Remember the scene of Jonah that wants to, he's escaping. God wants him to go to convert Nineveh, and he doesn't want to take on the job. And then, eventually, the whole scene with the being on the little boat and the storm and the whale, etc. And eventually he gets to Nineveh, and then he's mad because, well, he made this whole thing and nothing happened, right? So it's like saying, oh God, I did all this work for you and you do nothing, right? So what's happening here with Elijah is that he really is mad because he is not, God is not caring for him according to his agenda, right? He's worried about his own ego, his own thing. I've done all these things, And here, I'm here forced to escape. I mean, what was that all for? Burning all those sacrifices, the big show with the prophets, me killing them all, and here I am running away from my life. So what's really in the way of this first encounter of Elijah with the desert, right? With this sort of contemplative moment in his life, is that he finds his own ego, his own disappointments of being made a fool of, right? And throughout this whole thing, you can say really throughout the text, when you read these 2 chapters of Kings, Elijah keeps talking, and he's posting his tweets everywhere, right? It's just like out there, and instead of listening or seeking really for what really God wants for him, it's sort of out there making his own agenda, or what he thinks is God's agenda, but in reality is his own disappointment for being made a fool of. So what happens next? So the next section is, I call it the voice of God. So it's an interesting text because here's what happens. And God said, "Go forth and stand upon the mount before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, still small voice." So these last words, which in Hebrew are kol dmama daka, I think are one of the most poorly translated pieces of the Torah, or perhaps just very complex, because the kol dmama daka doesn't really mean a still small voice, but it could be translated the voice of subtle silence, but anyway, what's really is the protagonist here is the word dmama, right? That's not so much the voice, the quiet voice, but is the silence. So the Lord was not in the fire, but after the fire, there is this voice of silence. So let's make a little diversion and talk about an interesting thing in Judaism, in Hebrew language, to be precise, is that there is an enormous, quite a few ways of saying silence, or using different words to mean silence, but there are very, very different nuances about the word. So one we may be familiar with is shtika or sheket, perhaps from Hebrew school. Stephen always tells me, sheket bevakasha. His Hebrew, teacher. So sheket. That's the silence of tranquility. Saying, well, stay quiet, right? Stay besheket. That's one way. Then there is elem, right? That's really the silence. It means the silence of those that cannot speak. So, for example, in slang Hebrew or modern Hebrew, ani be'elem means I am speechless, right? And it's said usually when you're shocked about something that someone else said, right? So there is this type of silence of saying, I can't speak. I'm silent because I'm speechless. This is too big for me, right? Then there is charesh, which means remaining silent when in reality there is an expectation that you will say something. For example, in the Psalms, it's a recurrent theme that David, those that were written by David, or anyway, the leading person in the Psalm says, Al techaresh, to God, don't stay quiet, speak up, say something, right? So that's another nuance of silence, of someone that's silent when it really is silent, but really should speak up. And then there is this other type of silence, which is dumia, the mama, the root is dalet mem, dom, right? that's a mysterious type of silence. And lo and behold, this is exactly the one that we find here when Elijah, is looking for God. There is these different things that look like manifestation of God, the earthquake, the flame, the wind, and God was not there. But after that, there is this quiet voice of silence. And lo and behold, the word that's used is this dmama, right? So this silence, quality of silence, is this absolute, total silence. This will give you again an idea. Well, number one, when you remember the children of Aaron are killed at some point. There is this story when Aaron is, Nadav Avihu, they bring the wrong sacrifice to God, and God kills them on the spot, right? And the text goes, Vaidom Aaron. And Aaron stood still. It was completely annihilated, right? In modern Hebrew, that root is, for example, anesthesia, right? So when you have this person in total sleepness, right? So that you see there, this silence is really something that's to do with absolute total stillness, if you will, real silence, void or darkness, or the silence of death, if you want, right? So that's the silence that Elijah meets. And if I'm going now down at the bottom of the text, and he said it was so when Elijah heard it. So it's very interesting. There is this total silence, this subtle voice of the mama, right? And when Elijah hears it, he understands that is God, that he's meeting God at last, because he wrapped his face in the mantle and he goes out and he stood at the entrance of the cave. And there came a voice unto him and said, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" So this is really something fascinating, right? And we can perhaps discuss it. So there is, first of all, a paradox.
I have a question about that, if I may.
Go ahead.
The emphasis on that last sentence, is it what are you doing here, Elijah? Or what are you doing here, Elijah? You know what I'm saying? Is God surprised that it's Elijah, or is God surprised that whatever he's doing, what he's doing?
Yep. The Hebrew goes, I didn't put the Hebrew in the text for you, but I have it in front of me.
Well, I wouldn't be able to understand it anyway. That's what...
Well, but I can tell you, it says, Ma lecha po Eliyahu. It says, it's interesting because that's his translation, right? But the literal Hebrew says, what is here for you, Elijah? Right? It's not so much about what he's doing, but it's more like, you remember when Adam and Chava, and Eve, they eat the apple, there is the whole mess, and God, is about to chase them out of the garden. But then before that, he goes and looks for them, right? And he goes around and it says, Ayecha, where are you? Like, where are you? It's more of a spiritual question. And again, here, he's not so much asking Elijah, what are you doing? I mean, are you hanging out here in the cave? Or no, he's really asking him, what are you really looking for? That's more the right translation. So I hope that answered the question.
Thank you. That's great.
So, so a couple of comments. The first thing is that we said this is the voice of total silence, and yet the text says Eliyahu hears it, right? So we understand that here is not just a matter of, it's something really deep that's being shown here. It's really something about what God is about, right? God is not in the sacrifices, is not in the burning of and killing of the prophets, is not in strength and power, right? But is this subtle voice of silence. And Elijah hears it, although it's being this voice of silence, he hears it. Another interesting thing is that before in the text, right, I'm going up again. It says, that Elijah comes into a cave and lodges there, and behold, the word of the Lord came to him. But after this encounter with God, which is not in the earthquake and not in the flames and not in the wind, the text says instead, voice unto him. So there is a huge difference between hearing the words and hearing a voice. So the voice is something unique. We may say the same words, but the voice is what makes us special, right? Everyone can recognize our voice. They may not, the words, may say the same word, but the way we say them, that's what makes us unique. So what's really the text is saying is that through this encounter with silence, Elijah really meets God personally. He hears his voice. This tiny voice of silence is the real intimate encounter of Elijah with God himself, the real God, not what he thinks that God is, the God that makes, edicts and laws and slaughters left and right. Okay. And lastly, though, we can see in the process that to get to that point, Elijah has to let go of his own agenda and his own ego and his own expectations about what was right to do. He thought that serving God or encountering God was slaughtering all the bad guys, right? And he gets mad when that doesn't happen. And so we have here a lesson about our own way of coping with difficulties and harder times, and showing how this contemplative space, which I call it in this context contemplative space, because it's way more than, it can be very personal. It doesn't have to be meditation, or we don't have to give it any special name, right? But it's important to have this space of silence to really become closer to ourselves and to really what God, according to this text, really is, right? Is this absolute stillness and yet full of richness and presence. So I think I'm going to wrap up, and we have good time to discuss, to share, to comment. And so I'm going to take the text out and go back to the group, so we can, comment, share about several things. We can talk about our own, mechanisms of coping skillfully or unskillfully with problems, and how are we, managing our own space and our own contemplative space. What do we do, or do we want to do it at all?
I'm reminded that that those times when I think I've heard what may be a divine voice, maybe it's my own, my own deepest self speaking to me, is you really have to find quiet places, whether that's out in the middle of the forest or in the desert, under the stars, or noise and distraction really get in the way of kind of when you really want to hear something important. You have to get rid of those distractions. At least that's my own experience with it. And there are ways. I mean, certainly you teach, Elena and Elena, and I as well, sometimes, that there are ways to learn to shut off that noise in your head so that you can hear deeply.
Thank you, Jeremy. Absolutely. I find that in the midst of all, for example, the pre-election weeks, and that in particular last week, when there was this huge uncertainty about the outcome of the election, and I think it was challenging for everybody. I respect every political opinion. I think it was challenging for people on both sides. And that was a moment in which it really was very essential, I thought, to preserve that contemplative space, because the amount of I remember one day I probably reached out to my phone to look at news, what was going on with the New York Times app, probably 30 times. And then I said, this is not right. This has to stop. And so that's just a recent example of how, we do have in our tradition this, just the fact there are 7 different ways of naming different types of silence, just tells how important this dimension is to our tradition. No matter how we decide to use or to create that space. For some people, really is just going for a walk. That's enough. And for some of us who are more religiously inclined, in the sense of traditional or observant, it may be, going to join in morning minyan or even minyan or praying by ourselves. From others, it may be meditation, it may be one of the mind-body practices, of our choice. But the important thing is that space is absolutely critical if we want truly to meet God in the widest sense, the real God, not the one that, we project, the one that burns and kills and divides. Any other question or comment?
Well, I think that you mentioned it just now about walking, but I've always found that the physical activity helps the thinking process, going way back whenever I had, even when I was in school and so on. But also the fact that he did move around. He left and he went out in the desert, and then he came to the cave and so on. He did have a lot of movement, and maybe that helped move, quote unquote, move him along in his thinking too, clarify his thinking.
Yeah. Thank you, Sandy. I didn't think about that, and it's actually a good, it's an excellent thought. I didn't think about it at all, and I find that physical activity has this powerful effect, right? At least on me, when I'm, it's a good preparation for maybe a deeper contemplative moment, but it's a good preparation. Really makes the body more focused or more, around the activity itself, and it prepares or sets the stage for more calmness, perhaps, to come in, more clarity of vision. So it really sees in his Elijah's journeys is really becomes from, first he brings the servant to Beersheba, right? And then he keeps going south. And then there is this time when he falls asleep and the angels go and feed him and nourish him. And they say, you can make it, you can come through this, so there is this whole phase in which there is this taking care of the body, right? So the physical activity, exercise is part of it. It's really taking good care of ourselves. And only when the body is ready, then we can actually, embark on any spiritual search or journey, right?
That's what's helped me so much during this pandemic, is to get out every day and walk. It makes it, it's more tolerable, I guess, not tolerable, but more tolerable.
Absolutely. I think we all share the experience. We're lucky that we do have access, to, my family lives in Italy, and they're all, live in a big city in the north of the country, and they, there are no houses, people live in apartments. So it's been extremely hard. Now they have another lockdown, and people are really, they can't go out the house. It's been extremely hard. I feel we're lucky in having access to nature, at least in Worcester. Any other thought? Comments or struggles, or I saw that some people join us later, so it's going to be hard for them now to catch up and ask questions, since we, missed the beginning of we're talking about, how we can use silence can be a coping strategy in harder times. You know, we use the story of Elijah escaping from the, you know, King Ahab and Jezebel when want him to kill him, and his spiritual sort of path, you know, in the role of silence into this.
I think there's also a way in which silence, for those of us who take care of other people, silence, the use of silence can be very therapeutic as well. I mean, rather than just, and I think all of us, sometimes silence can be very uncomfortable, but it is also sometimes a very, very powerful tool. Like if somebody's expressing something that's difficult, we sometimes just feel like we want to jump in and say something to comfort them, or to reassure them, or even to ask further questions or whatever. But sometimes it's best to just be quiet and let the person go where they need to go, and they'll find that way. It's very awkward sometimes to be quiet like that, but it's very powerful too.
Thank you, Jeremy. Yes, I don't know if any of the words, you know, the Hebrew words for silence, you know, and has, you know, if there's any of them that really embraces that quality, you know, of acceptance, I guess, you know, really letting the person be, you know, with his own discomfort and not rushing to help. I find that very hard, because, you know, we are trained to help and to accept that the other person can be just left there, and there is a healing into just being listened to, right, without anyone giving advice. And yet our own good culture, you know, teaches us or tells us that, you know, if there is discomfort, you know, we rush and help. So in reality, a lot of times when I prefer to talk about myself, so I don't generalize. When I do feel that urgency to go and fix, really what I am trying to avoid is the discomfort, right? My own discomfort of having to listen to another person pain, right? So in order to avoid that encounter, you know, I try to feel that discomfort by talking, right? But, you know, the making a big leap, you know, and going to a sort of contemplative traditions of the East, you know, instead of, you know, the Middle East, we're talking about Asian contemplative traditions. That type of Buddhism, for example, has two different words for compassion. There are two different ways of you know, when we have that urgency to shut the other person because we're uncomfortable with their discomfort, in reality, there is a word that is really, we would translate like pity. We feel pity for the person. And because we feel that, you know, we start giving advice. And instead, when we really are able to create that space, that's really the root of true compassion, you know, of letting the other person be and embracing that pain, you know, embracing our own discomfort and not rushing, you know, to fill the void. That's really, you know, welcoming and embracing the other person. Although, again, you know, that's silence. Although actually we're not doing anything or saying anything for that matter.
It's interesting to me when you found yourself checking the news 30 times in, you know, in a few hours or whatever. That's a manifestation, it would seem to me, of anxiety. Okay. But what I try to do is think about not doing things that are wasting energy. Okay. And there's a lot of activities that I find, I'll talk for myself, that I can become engaged in that are really a waste of energy. Like worrying, for example. I mean, worrying, what does worrying accomplish? It really, you know, it's just that's a waste of energy. Or trying to blame somebody. And in the election, you know, the Democrats are blaming the Republicans are blaming the Democrats, everybody's blaming the weather, whatever it is. But, and it doesn't really, it's a waste of energy. It's not who we blame, it's whatever we're gonna do to make it better or fix it or what have you. And the other element here that's going on is what's the media and the news trying to do? They profit and benefit by having us more confused and more chaos, because then they think we're going to watch the news more. So they don't benefit by being reassuring. Okay, they keep telling us it's the most divided time in our country's history and this and that. And, you know, I mean, I'm thinking about the war in Vietnam, and people were fighting in the streets in America. That was much more, in a way, much more divided actively than we are now. And it doesn't really matter. But the point is, don't even look at the news. Have an embargo from the news for a day or two if you can. And you feel better by doing that, and just breaking away from that kind of chaos. So those are just a few things that I think I benefit from. Maybe it's a cocoon kind of thing, but it seems to work.
Right. Thank you, Alan. I think that, you know, going back to Elijah, it's in all this, it's important to sort of hearing the word, the voice and not the words. So to keep in mind that we are persons, right? So, and every one of us has a voice that needs to be respected and welcomed. And sometimes the voice is more important than the words, right? So to recognize always that uniqueness and right, and how every person is truly special, besides, you know, political ideas or limitations, or right. We want to really look at that, keep that humanity going, like Elijah did, right? When he really encountered God in silence, he was beyond the words, you know, he just able to hear his voice, and yet he was a silent voice, right? So just keep that, or cultivate that, you know, to avoid, you know, to stay together, to keep our humanity, you know, because that's what we are, you know, in these times. And I think that cultivating that contemplative part of life helps us, reminds us of this common humanity. You know, we all suffer, we all want to be happy one way or another, right? And that's really the important thing. We have, I think, 4 minutes for any comment or question. Or we can just, you know, say good night. We don't have to stay until the, you know, we can just enjoy the pleasure of being together this Saturday night. I think this Thorathon has been a success. I mean, I've seen like 120 people, but I see Jeremy saying we can just take some good, solid deep breaths. So why don't we do, and you know that some of you know that, oh, the room closes in 3 minutes. This is perfect. So what I suggest we do, although I didn't plan on it, you know, I teach meditation for Beth Israel, right? Which is a neutral practice, is not religious, is not, oh, they're telling us they won't close the room if they want to stay a little longer. So why don't we just take a few moments? I have some of my pupils in my meditation class out here. So thank you, Jeremy, for the suggestion. Why don't we just join in a few moments of practice, right? Just to practice silence together. So just starting to find a comfortable position wherever you are, if you're seated at your desk or on the sofa, just becoming aware of the contact of the feet with the rug or the mat or the floor, feeling the texture of that surface you're touching, becoming aware of the position of the body, becoming aware of where your hands are, and perhaps moving them, gently moving them to your thighs or in your lap. Relaxing the muscles of the face and the eyes. Gently strengthening the spine. And if you didn't do it yet, just allowing the eyes to close. And whenever we're ready, guiding the awareness to the breath. Just bringing attention to the area of the chest where the breath is felt most. Noticing the lifting of the rib cage or the belly. Noticing perhaps the sensations of the breath at the nostrils. Bringing awareness to each in-breath and to each out-breath. And if any lingering thought is coming and going, or any lingering emotion, just letting them be and guiding the attention back to the breath. And before we say goodbye for the night, just allowing a sense of gratitude for having spent this hour together. I know I am very grateful for this. And taking a long, long breath in and out. And letting the eyes open whenever we're ready. And making eye contact with the others or whoever is on video. Those that are not, well, we'll say goodnight anyway. Take care, Sandy. Bye. Bye, everybody. Pamela, David, Joyce, Bonnie, Jeremy, Natalie, Nina, Alan, Alyssa, Thank you so much for being our guardian angel, guardian angel. Hi, Bonnie. Have a good night. Stay well. It was wonderful to see you.
Thank you, Elena.
Bye.
Bye.